Hey everybody, thank you so much for being here with me this morning. As you all know, my name is Mary Evelyn, and I have been interning here at the Baldwin County Health Department throughout this semester to graduate with my bachelor's in public health from Georgia College and State University. So for my internship, I had to create a project that will have a lasting impact here on the health department after my internship ends in a couple weeks. When I was deciding on what I wanted my project to be, I kind of looked at what's already in place here at the health department and what might be missing. Because this is a government building and business per to say, there wasn't a whole lot of gaps to fill in. However, one of the things that I found was a gap of education between our environmentalists and the employees that are daily hands-on in restaurants, so preparing food and serving food, cooking food. So my goal of this project is to educate college employees in restaurants on food safety and how they can better protect the public that eats in their restaurants and how they can help improve their restaurant's overall health inspection score. So throughout my project, we're gonna go through a bit of an agenda, what I did, how I did it, and why I did it. So first, we're gonna talk about the project mission, what I hope to achieve throughout this project, and the purpose of why I wanted to do this project. We're gonna talk a little bit about why I chose the population that I chose. To find out what I needed to educate on, I did a community needs assessment. I'm going to talk about student employee verification and how I was able to determine if college students worked in certain restaurants or not. I did a little bit of research on marketing and how we can best reach our population. We're going to talk about the resources that I use, the resources that were already out there, the materials that I made for this project, and then how we're going to outreach to this community and what I expect the results will be from that outreach. So the purpose of my project is to improve food safety education for college students that are employed in restaurants in downtown Milledgeville, Georgia, based on violations from previous health inspections through targeted educational materials. I know that was a bit of a lot, but the point of my purpose, what the main goal is to improve education in college students who work in restaurants here in downtown Milledgeville. So I used violations that were found in the most recent health inspections to figure out where the education gap might be for these employees. So why college students? 27% of restaurant employees are enrolled in school, with almost 11% of those being college-age students, like 19 to 23. 40% of full-time college students are employed. So that means they are involved in the workforce one way or another. Throughout my personal college experience over the last 4 years, I spent 3 years working in restaurants, and I've seen a lot of where an education gap can be. And I felt really passionate about filling that gap that I saw firsthand for the next generation of restaurant employed students here in Milledgeville. Another big thing that I noted throughout my internship was that ServSafe certifications are often done by owners and managements rather than the employees who are handling food on a daily basis. So those in charge have the education that they need, but those who are actually cooking, preparing, and serving food on a daily basis, those college student employees don't have that ServSafe education. And so that might be another place where that education gap comes into play. So my community needs assessment. I covered 3 main things: which restaurants to include in my study, the previous scores that they had, and how to market towards my population. So originally 18 restaurants were chosen based on their location being downtown in Milledgeville, Georgia. These restaurants are either on the main street that runs through downtown or on the adjacent streets around it. 18 restaurants gives enough data on recent inspections to find really prominent violations, repeating violations, ones that you see either more than once in the specific restaurants and ones that you see in multiple restaurants happening either one or more times. These restaurants are ideal places for college students to work due to their proximity to campus and where student housing is. So next, I got the information from their 3 most previous scores. 3 is a good number to get enough data from to see enough repeating violations. So I gained that information from the Georgia Department of Health website. All health restaurant inspections are public information, so I was able to find them on my own. And then lastly, how to market to my specific population. So it's important to target the population in a way that makes the information relevant to them and makes it to where they care enough to actually implement that education into their lives and into their jobs. So marketing is about meeting your population where they are so they can understand what you're saying rather than asking them to come to you. And a big number that I found is that 83% of restaurants in downtown Milledgeville have college students on their staff. So of those 18, 15 restaurants had college students on their staff. So I found 4 major violations that were repeating in these 3 previous inspections throughout those restaurants. So the first one was food contact surfaces being cleaned and sanitized. 7 of the 15 restaurants showed violations of properly cleaned food contact surfaces at least once. This could include mold in an ice machine or food debris on what are supposed to be clean dishes where food is going to be cooked on or stored in. Proper dating and labeling. 6 of these 15 restaurants showed violations of properly dating and disposing of foods at least once in their 3 inspections. This can include not dating and not labeling food out of its original container at all, or not disposing of food once it's past its use by date. Another was utensil storing. So 6 of these 15 restaurants showed violations of proper utensil storage at least once. So that can include the scoops being without handles at all. So just like a bowl, something that doesn't have a handle to hold on to, or those handles are found touching the food products, like a scoop touching the ice in the ice machine, or a scoop touching rice in a big rice bin. That's where the contamination can happen. And then lastly, hand washing procedures and maintained facilities. So 5 of the 15 restaurants showed violations of proper hand washing procedures and maintaining facilities, and that can include not having hot water to wash your hands or not knowing when to wash your hands and not washing them when you should be washing them. So how I verified college student employees at these restaurants, I reached out to each restaurant on my list, the original 18, via phone calls for confirmation on college students being a part of their staff. 3 of these restaurants replied no, leaving 15 total restaurants to use for my project, which is where I got that number 15 on my last slide and talked about how many of 15 had those violations. The large majority of college employees makes this project really relevant for these businesses and this population. So this means a lot of those restaurants downtown are depending on their college student employees to follow the right rules and regulations to ensure they're getting high health scores and providing safe and clean service to their guests. So I used a little script on the phone to talk to people that answered, just a hi, my name is Evelyn Pritchett, and I am an intern at the Baldwin County Health Department. I'm doing my senior project on college students working in restaurants downtown. Would you mind informing me if you have enrolled college students currently on your staff? Thank you for your time and cooperation. This allowed me to tell them who I am, the purpose of my phone call, what information I needed from them, and just to be polite. In my research on how to market public health, I found 4 key topics to cover. So staying away from clinical and technical terms is the biggest one that I found, especially when working with college students. Using big clinical and technical words can confuse people, and it can make them feel like they're being belittled by not knowing what you're talking about. So breaking it down and using words that they can understand and using daily words, less than extremely technical terms, can help them fully understand what you're saying and feel like you have met them where they are rather than trying to get them where you are. Using engaging visuals with short, direct messages. So one thing that I found when deciding on my project was a handful of brochures and flyers here at the health department, in the environmental health branch. And I brought one of them with me. So you can see on this one, it's for tattooing and body piercing safety. But when you open it, it just has so many words kind of crammed on these little pages that it's hard to keep the attention of your reader. So rather than having short little bullet messages to get the point across, they kind of get lost in all the words. So having those short direct messages can really help keep them engaged and get your point across quicker. Targeting your population through using their language and representing diversity. With college students, it's not necessarily a niche population, so you're not trying to target specific diverse aspects of the population. You're trying to appease to all of them, and using their language that just kind of ties back into not using super clinical and technical terms, and then including a call to action through specific examples. So not only are you educating them, you're bringing them to a call of action to say, this is why you should wash your hands. Now go wash your hands. Like, you're trying to tie together that education and a call to action to make sure that education actually has behavioral changes. So the 3 main resources that I use is obviously the Georgia Department of Public Health. So I used environmental health inspections. That's where I found my data on the 3 most previous inspections for my 15 restaurants. I was able to find their past scores, numerical scores, as well as the specific violations that they had during those inspections, and that's where the chunk of my project came from. And then the Georgia Food Service rules and regulations that allowed me to find information about the very specific rule that they broke, and why it's important that it's fixed. And that gave me some information to put on my brochures to just better help educate. I used Galileo to do my research on marketing to college students. This is accessible to me as a Georgia College and State University student. And then I used the National Restaurant Association, which has statistics based on a US Census. And that's where I got my percentages, about 27% of restaurant employees being college enrolled students. So the materials that I made for this project, the first step was creating this Excel spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet covers the restaurants. It actually has all 18 downtown restaurants included on here. Their most recent score, the violations that were found during that score, and then it goes on for 3. So it has the most recent, the second most recent, and the third most recent. And then on the final column of this Excel spreadsheet is where I put yes or no on if college students were employed, which is where I was able to take 3 of those restaurants back out, leaving me with 15. So this spreadsheet is where I was able to summarize all of the violations that I found during their inspections, and this is where I was able to find where the top 4 violations were. So those 4 that we talked about earlier, the utensils, the hand washing, the surface cleaning. That was all because of this summary. So I was able to connect the dots between the restaurants and multiple violations, either being repeat for one specific restaurant or being across multiple restaurants. If a restaurant did have a repeat violation, I still only counted it as one, just because I wanted to make sure that we got a true number on restaurants having violations rather than one restaurant having a repeated violation over and over. And then the main part of my project is creating this brochure. So this is the first page. I have one printed out with me. So this is this part. So this is just the cover page, food safety in restaurants. That's what we're talking about here. And then start with clean surfaces, preventing buildup and contamination. So at the top, I put the rule, which is I found from the DPH website, the specific rule that had a violation broken. I talked about why it matters for clean surfaces. I feel like it's important to know why you're cleaning these surfaces, why it matters. We talked a little bit about why it matters, like prevents foodborne illness, reduces cross-contamination, prevents allergens from crossing over. Just a couple notes about when to clean. So before preparing food, after preparing raw food on a prep surface, and regularly cleaning during continuous use. And then next we did dates and labels. So again, I have the rule here up at the top. And then I provided an example here about what a properly filled out date and label should look like. So you have the item, so you have the name, that's a label. You have the day it was prepped, the use by date, and then it has an employee initials. So I feel like that's really important in marketing towards college students, is providing them an example of what it should look like. And then just a couple little pro tips at the bottom, like labeling immediately before you walk away from prepping the food. If you see food in the cooler that doesn't have a label or date on it, just go ahead and throw it away. So just a couple things that they can kind of keep in their back pocket, in their head while they're prepping food. So that's the front of our brochure. And then the back has hand washing and storing utensils. So hand washing, once again, we carried the rule over right on the top. Part of carrying the rule over is so that not only are they kind of being educated on what to do and why they're doing it, but they can read the specific rule that the restaurant has violated in the past. Just to kind of tie together, like, this is the rule that you need to be following, and this is how you can do it and why it's important to do it. So we carried the rule over for all four. For hand washing, we talked about when to hand wash. So after using the restroom, before you're preparing or serving food, after sneezing or coughing. And then I broke down how to wash your hands. Now I will say, part of permitting a restaurant from the health department is having those hand wash lines above every hand wash sink. But after being in a lot of restaurants throughout my internship, a lot of those have been sitting there like the same sign since the restaurant opened. So they just kind of get grungy and dirty and knocked over, and they're just kind of like ignored behind the sink. So I broke down the steps of how to wash your hands again, just in case those signs in these specific restaurants have seen a lot of days. And then just a little tip, if you've seen the ABCs twice, it's at least 20 seconds. So a little pro tip, just sing the ABCs twice while you're washing your hands, and you should hit that 20-second mark, unless you're singing really, really fast. Next, we talked about storing utensils. So what does that mean? I will say, as somebody who worked in a restaurant for a long time before interning here, I didn't really know the rule, I just knew we weren't allowed to leave the handle of the ice scoop and the ice scoop in the ice bin, that's all I knew. And so I thought it was important to kind of say like what this rule means. Just because I know personally that there is an education gap there. You should only touch the handle and the handle should never touch the food. Broke it down in a really simple terms. And then make sure it can dry without getting mold on it, especially because ice scoops spend so much time in moist, wet environments. You want to make sure you pull them out and keep them in a dry, place so that they can't grow mold on them. And then again, I included a little picture of right and wrong on this one. So here you can see the ice scoop handle is laying in the ice, touching it. That's wrong. That's cross contamination. We don't want that. And then the one with the little check mark, the handle is sticking up out of the ice. So once again, tying in those important visuals that I found in my research about marketing to make sure that we're really gaining the attention of my population. And then my call to action is just on the last page. I try to keep it subtle, but in a way that, you know, is still a call to action. It just says, thanks for keeping our restaurants clean and safe. Wording it like this doesn't put this big heavy like pressure on college students, but you know, it lets them know that by doing this and by really upholding these rules and violations, they are keeping the restaurant clean, they are keeping the inspection score up, and they're helping protect the public from foodborne illnesses, allergy issues, and just overall contamination. So the outreach for my project is pretty simple. There are 3 people involved. One is our health inspectors, so our environmentalists can take a stack of brochures with them when inspecting restaurants. These don't have to be just for restaurants downtown. Obviously, that we want our education to go as broad as possible. But specifically for those restaurants that have a lot of college students employed, it's really important to make sure that we're reaching our target population and audience. So our environmentalists can take these with them to their inspections and they can leave them with the general manager or owner, whoever walks through the inspection with them that day, whoever signs the inspection, talks with them. They can just say, hey, like, we're wanting to help you educate your employees better. Here's a stack of brochures you can hand out to your employees. And it just kind of touches a couple of those top violations that we see. Then our management team hands out those flyers and brochures to their employees. That's a really important part of this, obviously, is that management taking enough responsibility to pass those to their employees. That's where it's really going to become vital that our population is actually being reached and actually being educated. Because if that management staff takes that stack of brochures and just puts them in the office, the education isn't actually being dispersed to the staff. And so maybe a way of motivating them is saying, you know, these are some of the violations that we see quite a lot. If you hand these out to your staff and make sure they're educated on these things, your restaurant will have higher health scores. It can help your business. It can help your reputation. So kind of pulling in that draw of why they should do it is important to make sure we're actually getting our education out there. And then lastly, our target are the employees. So the employees are given the brochures or flyers. They're just told to read them and they can keep them either like in the little apron or like their book, you know, where they keep their cash or their receipts. And so they just kind of have them on them or next to them during their shift by keeping it in a work related area. Just as like a reference, they can hold on to it and they can keep it for when, you know, they might be a little confused about how to do something or just need a frame of reference. Like for the label, they can pull it out, they'll see the picture of how a label is properly done. It gives them the visual and an example. So just being able to hold on to it and have it when you need it. So what do we expect from this project? Obviously to increase the overall grade of downtown restaurants in Milledgeville, Georgia. Not only are we trying to increase the overall grade, we're trying to have a decrease of these violations specifically. And I do believe, that through this education, we will see a decrease of these violations throughout the next 2 years. You do kind of have to broaden your timeline just because health inspections tend to only take place twice a year unless follow-ups are required. And so if you put your timeline 2 years, that's only 4 health inspections to kind of see a drop in these violations. But I think because our data was pulled from 3 health inspections, I think 2 years is a pretty good base to see if these violations have dropped throughout those 4 health inspections in 2 years. Increased education of food safety and college student employees. This is really important, in protecting our public as well as empowering our college student employees. We want to make sure that they feel confident walking into work. We want to make sure they feel confident when a health inspector walks in, when they are on the clock, that they know they have enough education, that they don't have to be frantic, they don't have to run to a cooler and make sure everything's labeled before they walk in. But they're educated in a way that labels are always there, dates are always there, surfaces are always clean, hands are always washed, whether we're in the building or not. And it kind of puts ease on their minds that they are educated and actually practicing their education. Nobody's running around when we walk in the door. They know that they are educated enough to do what they need to do. Providing a free resource for management to hand out to their staff. This I feel like kind of ties back into ServSafe being provided only for general managers or restaurant owners. Most restaurants don't require their kitchen or service staff to have ServSafe because it's not required by us at the health department. And so providing like an easy free resources that they just have to hand out to their employees is, I think, beneficial to them and beneficial to the employees because they don't have to, it just kind of fills in that gap where ServSafe might, without having to have 30 employees pay and go take a class. And it encourages behavior changes and a call to action and employees that are better educated. So this is where we're going to tie back into the top. Encouraging behavioral changes through education is where we're going to see an increase in overall grades and a decrease of these violations. Thank you guys so much for coming this morning and listening. I've been really thankful to do my internship here, and I am thankful that you have all let me into your workspace. So thank you so much.